Earlier this evening, I spoke to Olenka Prokopenko, co-chair of the Transatlantic Task Force on Ukraine. I asked her how significant she thought the incident at the Kakhovka Dam was now for Kiev.
Well, this is, of course, the largest attack on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine that Russia has conducted since starting its full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. And there is, of course, plenty of evidence that the catastrophe was caused by Russia. First of all, Russia has controlled the station for over a year, and Ukraine has warned way before about the anticipated attack. So on the Ukrainian side, we have no doubt that it was Russia who has to be fully responsible for this attack. And we understand the purposes. We understand that it was likely due to Russia's attempt to stall Ukraine's counteroffensive, which probably is not going to affect it significantly. But another purpose of this attack was to test the Western resolve when it comes to its declared red lines, and we see that the resolve, the reaction was very insignificant. It was quite weak, I would say, and it's very concerning that amid all the aftermath, all the consequences that this tragedy has caused, having seen virtually no reaction from the international community, Russia may take this as a green light to blow up Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is basically a static nuclear weapon.
From your tone, you're very much echoing what President Zelensky has said. He's been critical of the international response. What do you think the international community could and should have done so quickly after this pretty devastating breach?
Yeah, the international response has to be significantly stronger. First of all, our partners should support the efforts of the Ukrainian authorities to investigate this war crime, to impose further sanctions on Russia, to ensure that Russia pays in full for all the massive destruction it has inflicted. And again, we're talking about tens of thousands of people, at least, who lost their homes. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of animals who have died already. We are talking about the largest environmental catastrophe in Europe in decades. So these are the steps that the international community should take. But first and foremost, Ukraine needs more weapons from the West to successfully counter the Russian aggression, because we see once again, after this dam attack, that Russia will continue to escalate. And when I see statements by NATO officials that NATO has a plan in case Russia goes as far as using nuclear weapons, I'm wondering, why do we need to wait until it does? Why do we need to have a plan for the aftermath of that if we can strengthen Ukraine's capacity to conduct an effective counteroffensive? And finally, restore both Ukrainian recognized borders and sustainable peace in Europe.
Well, you can imagine that Ukraine and the Russian invasion will be high on the agenda of talks between Prime Minister Sunak and President Biden in Washington this evening. But let's remind ourselves, I mean, they've agreed for fighter jets to be delivered, for Western tanks, Storm Shadow, missiles, all of these things, but it's going to take time. And at the same time, it would appear that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has begun. What can you tell us about this counteroffensive and how the early days, the early hours have been?
Yes, there are reasons to believe that the counteroffensive is already starting as we speak, basically, and there have been some achievements on the front lines already. Ukrainian forces have enhanced attacks in the southeast of Ukraine, and this is likely an attempt to break off the land corridor between continental Russia and occupied Crimea, and by means of doing this, to cut off Russia's supply lines. There's also a probability that Ukrainian armed forces will actually attempt to liberate Melitopol and Energodar, where Zaporizhzhia power plant is located. And we just discussed how much of a threat to the entire planet this potential attack could be. But again, in terms of the prospects of this counteroffensive, Ukraine needs more weapons, and there's finally some progress we can see in the talks regarding the F-16 fighter jets, but these supplies have to be more systemic, and they have to be faster. The attack of the dam on the dam again is a sign that we will see more escalation, and some media, reputable ones, already say that Russia may go as far as conducting another terrorist attack, another attack on the Ukrainian infrastructure of the scale that would try to stall the Ukrainian counteroffensive. But we don't need to wait for that to happen. We need to equip Ukraine.
Let me ask you this question: how much frustration is there among the Ukrainian military establishment and the think tanks that Ukraine is having to abide by these Western conditions of use for the high-tech weapons that have been delivered? Do people that you talk to just simply want to take off the gloves and go after Russia where it hurts on Russian territory?
There's very much there's a lot of frustration that you're referring to, of course, and to avoid the escalation of that frustration, I would say Ukrainian leadership has been very actively ensuring progress in Ukraine implementing NATO standards and complying with the technical requirements and conditionalities. But again, I believe that both in terms of Ukrainian accession to NATO and the EU, the approach here has to be more strategic. We cannot go by the book in terms of following the formal technicalities that would apply in a more peaceful and normal environment and circumstances. We are anywhere but in the normal circumstances right now. We are in the middle of the largest war since World War II. So we do expect and ask our Western partners to develop a special procedure for Ukraine's accession, right? And as to regarding your question about Russia, about attacking objects in Russia, in the Russian territory, I really want to reiterate that Ukraine is fighting to liberate its own territories and to restore its own territorial integrity in the internationally recognized borders. And it does not aim to attack or capture any more territories. That said, of course, fuel stations, oil depots on the Russian territory could be considered legitimate military targets.